Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guest today is one of the most celebrated cartoonists of the last decade or so, Mr. Nate Powell, who, in one of those ironic twists of timing, just had a book come out last month and has another coming out next month because he's silly and always works on two books at once. And this time around, their publishing just like got put on top of each other. So, good morning, Nate. Thanks for joining me again. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me.
I love having you. You're fun to have. If you wound up putting it up on your website, so I ordered it already. Um, but I'm on spring break right now, so
Oh
I
yeah.
had been thinking of asking you if you had copies of Lies My Teacher Told Me already, and I would have driven down to pick one up if I hadn't been able to order one last week. Because, I mean, hang out with Nate Powell for a few minutes, grab a hard copy of the book,
You bet. The door-to-door
but
service.
but you put it up in time for me to just order it, and you can put it in the mail or hopefully already have um,
Yeah, actually, it's in
something
this
like that.
stack right here. It's going out
Okay,
tomorrow.
so we'll go out soon,
You
and
bet. Yeah,
I'm
I've done
close,
two
so we'll get here
rounds
soon.
so far.
2 rounds already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always love looking at your office. You have one of the coolest setups of anybody we work with.
Well, thank you.
I think because and I use you a lot when we're talking to people about their process, because I love that you and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the way it's always stuck in my head is it's like one of the reasons you always have the two books going is that you found that like the second you start getting bored of something, you kind of need to move on. So it's like, oh, I've been doing pencils for 45 minutes, but I'm done doing pencils. Let's go do inks on something. Let's go do colors on something. Let's go write that.
It helps. And like, yeah, one of my mantras is that all work is work. And
Right,
so, yeah, it's just a matter of like, sure, like I don't have a ton of time because I'm on my kids' school schedules. So it's just a
right.
matter of there's always something else to do. So it'd be like the second I start to notice, I'm like, I'm like, you know what? I've got 3 more hours to do today. Let's figure out what I would like to be doing that's on the list and just do that.
Right. I love it. I love it. But your office reflects that because you clearly have like kind of multiple workspaces and stuff to like go around. And it's just a cool workspace to look at. So
I've got
uh,
stations. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, you're up there. I think Jacob Phillips is in a not I think Jacob Phillips is in a container in a shipping yard in um well, a former shipping yard. Like all of the containers in this shipping yard have been turned into like
Wow.
office space, or there's a barber, there's a coffee shop,
Wow.
and I think Manchester.
That's wild.
Yeah. So when we talked to Jacob, we came from the inside of his shipping container. That was
Amazing.
pretty cool. I love. I mean, in your punk rock, uh, I brought my birthday present, the punk
Yes.
rocks. I got Spider Punk for my birthday this morning. Um, and you're punk rock, so I mean, you appreciate um the okay, let's just figure it out attitude that I think permeates comics.
Without a
One of my
doubt.
yeah, one of my high points this year was seeing you and Shelly and Reagan and Durf on the punk and comics panel because I mean it's great and we'll take this into fall through. Um, but I mean it's great thinking about punk music and comics because I like music and comics period and I like punk, but so much of comics just in and of itself is punk rock.
Without a
It's
doubt. So much of the ethos, but also just the general MO, which is like figure out what you're clarify what you're trying to do, figure out the ways to get there and realize that you can do 90% of it yourself.
right.
Yeah. And then also kind of like as you move along that, then there's where do it yourself becomes do it together, and realize that you're part of a community and that the people around you can fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah. So before I read a couple of wonderful words in the New York Times about Fall Through, because Sam Thielman, their new graphic novel critic, highlighted it in his first column. Um, give us your rundown of Fall Through, which I loved. It took me way too long to get to it,
Thank you.
because you sent it to me ages ago, but I was poring over lies you told me in history,
Of
or
course,
lies
yeah.
my teacher told me over and over, the teacher in me just, and then it's suddenly like, oh, wait a minute. I just got my digital copy that I pre-ordered, and I haven't finished reading the PDF that he
You
sent
bet.
me 3 months ago. I must finish now.
Well, yeah, like in a nutshell, Fall Through is like a 1990s interdimensional Southern punk relationship story. And in many ways, it's kind of the book I've been trying to make this whole time. So it
Yeah,
synthesizes a lot of constantly in progress themes and questions, and sort of puts them back into my home planet, which, is being a misfit among misfits, and this kind of like under discussed, still underground sub culture that shaped me, throughout the 1990s and into today.
yeah. Um, the line Sam gave that I loved was, Powell brings the punk aesthetic to life in ways subtle and overt. Captions are scrawled along guitar frets and in clouds of smoke. Odd scribbles become jagged logos, even words. There's no color in Jodi's life, literally, until she begins to meet her future bandmates. But the group's signature song turns out to have an uncanny, possibly even supernatural effect on the audience. And when Powell draws their performances, the images are heightened and stylized, and better to pass along than the frisson so essential to punk art, rock, or otherwise. Um, and he picked out. I don't know if you saw the New York Times
I
article. You
did,
did,
yes.
yeah. No, he picked out a fantastic page, um, of a performance, and a lot more people have been trying to do it lately, and I love that because for a long time when I would sit there and say that the comics was the perfect medium because there was nothing you couldn't do, um, people would try to argue music. You can't convey music, and I'm like, I don't know if that's true. Um, and,
Well,
and
what
I think your book is one of many that proves that it's not true. I mean, you
what
don't
in my
necessarily.
opinion,
Yeah,
I feel
go ahead.
like one of the like the easiest way to describe one of the greatest unique strengths of comics is the ability to convey other sensory states that are not using the sense of sight, but
Right.
auditory experiences, smell,
Yeah.
texture, the ability to convey this through the strictly visual medium of comics.
Right.
uh, it's wild that it's so successful, and yet when you really get down to it, especially with the sort of interplay between the creator and the reader and the control dynamic about the passage of time and the way that works
Right.
with the fact that when we listen to music we are bound by linear time, like it, comics in that way are really ripe for experimentation with music.
With Yeah, definitely with music, with everything. Um, I mean, so often, they adapted. It was actually an opera singer that did the writing, Alex Schrader, and P. Craig Russell did the layouts with Aniki doing the finishes. They adapted Carmen, and
Wow.
Carmen is an opera that I know well, and I would hear it as I was reading it. You're adapting things that either are songs that nobody has ever heard because you wrote them for the book, or songs that very few people have ever heard,
Yeah.
which means that what I'm hearing isn't necessarily what you're hearing, but I'm still hearing punk rock.
You bet.
And in some ways, that's even more. I mean, that the first place I noticed that. Have you ever seen Palomino?
I've heard of Palomino, but I've never read it.
Okay. It was Howard Chaykin stumped me. He made a recommendation that I hadn't heard of, and I immediately picked it up. And then I wound up talking to Stefan Frank because it's amazing. And it too has parts of it are set in a honky tonk bar, and
Right
and
on.
he clearly wrote it for this. So it's not a song I know. Even if he didn't write it for this, I don't know most honky tonk music, but I'm hearing like my version of that in my head just from the way he did circles and did the
Oh yeah,
letters, you
excellent.
know. Um, just amazing stuff. And Dave, why did I just forget his name? He's right here. Dave Chisholm has done both the Enter the Blue and the Miles Davis at C2, and those are just
Yeah,
overwhelming. So I mean, it was so cool to see one of my favorite cartoonists
you bet.
enter that pantheon. See,
And
I knew I'd bring it back to you eventually. It's early in the morning. I'm rambling more than normal. I'm sorry, Nate.
you're doing great.
Like hit me over the head if I'm dominating too much.
Not at all. No, Z2 is like just it's been really exciting over the years to see Z2 kind of lean in
Hmm.
to musical adaptations and tributes
Hmm.
and be able to sort of establish a little field for themselves where
Yeah,
people are able to kind of where creators are able to play but also see where their work fits in with other Z2 releases. It's been awesome.
right, right.
And yeah, in terms of what you were saying about not essentially not giving clues about any objective sound that the band Diamond Mine may have or what the song Fall Through may actually sound like. That was actually one of the my early creative considerations where I realized I needed to draw a line for myself, figuratively speaking, uh, was simply that since so much of what I was talking about in Fall Through was the way any kind of creative movement sort of has these transitional moments where a free space is cleared out for new ideas, new voices, new possibilities, and something is happening that remains undefined. And then we go through a process, any community goes through a process of learning how to talk about that. And in doing so, kind of crystallize and flatten and simplify things and mythologize them so that what the way we talk about these moments and the way we even remember them is often a lot less unique, less weird, less diverse than things really were. So yeah, Diamond Mine as a band is out of time and out of place in their own scene, really. And so the important thing was that they are a presence that really sounds like nothing else at the time, which is how I really, when I get back into this kind of era that this covers in the mid 1990s, that's actually more of like the overarching reality, despite different kinds of sounds that we may associate with any moment in music. But I was like, it would be a big mistake if I actually tried to pinpoint or tried to communicate what this band really sounded like. The only way it's going to have power and live for the reader is if I give no, explicit directive and let the band become their own thing for each reader. So, yeah, that was pretty important to me.
Just out of curiosity, do you like have the song in your head?
No, I actually don't have the song itself. Like there are certain things that I know are a part of the song. Um, and like I do know that the main bass line is repetitive almost for the entire song. I know that Jody, the bass player, uh, plays a little higher up on the neck for this song and plays more in chords, as was sort of like a development in that sliver of punk in the early and mid 1990s. But beyond that, like I know in my own head a couple of bands that that they may sound a little bit like. Uh, but no, I actually tried to keep it free for myself. There was a certain point where I was like, when I realized I had to write the lyrics down, I was like, well, the lyrics to the song is a big part of the writing of the book. I have to do this as undefined as I want it to be. And then I was like, and every once in a while at night I would play bass and I would kind of be like, oh, I think I've actually figured out one of the parts of the song. And then I would kind of stop myself. I'm like, if I go any further, I'm going to find myself feeling like I need to actually record the song. And I was like, this is one of those things that seems cool at the time, and it's going to ultimately kill the magic of the sort of like open mystery by defining it. Like it's sort of going against what that theme of the book is for me to define it completely.
Though, I mean, I'll take that on a mild tangent before coming back to something that you said a minute ago about this being the book that you've been writing for your career. Have you ever considered trying to get the Comic Con equivalent of Stephen King's Rock Bottom Remainders going?
Uh,
Because that would be the perfect song to write as the debut song for that, and you
True.
guys could do your after parties at various Comic Cons.
Well, this is actually where my this is where my deeply ingrained punk like reactionary snobbery kicks in,
Right.
and I'm like, if there's anything I could do that would absolutely destroy what I've been working on with this weird band and this weird book, it would be to actually make
Actually
it
write the
something that
song.
was performed,
That's
something
fair.
that was, yeah. And I was like, yeah, but it's funny because that ticks a very specific box of like judgy punkness where it's like, it's not for that.
Okay, but aside from the using this song, is that something that you've ever considered?
Um,
I mean, I think it would be great to have the comics version that like really only played together when they were at, I mean, because that's essentially how it works. There's more than a band's worth of people who
sure,
play, and for a long time they had Zevon as their music director. So I don't know who you pull off
right,
as your music director. You'd have to like ask around. There have been I mean, Slash is doing a comic right now. So I mean, there's some
true, yeah,
music type people in
yeah,
comics. um,
yeah. It would be a
but like
wild turn of events.
the like collective of comics writers and artists who would essentially do jam sessions at cons where they happen to
Yeah.
be together. Is that something that's ever crossed your mind as something that
Not
would be?
really, but
No.
every once in a while I've popped in on a post-con event or soiree or of whatever kind. I've seen like Mike Allred, Mike and Laura's band
Okay.
uh, play, and yeah, every once in a while a band will pop up. Jim Demonakos, who was the co-writer on the book I did, The Silence of Our Friends, he had
Okay.
a band called Kirby Crackle
Okay.
in the early 2010s. I did a 7-inch cover. Well, I guess it was digital. I did a single cover that was Green Lantern themed for
Nice.
his band. And having never read a Green Lantern comic, it was one of
Wow.
these things where I'm like, who am I going to piss off by drawing Green Lantern incorrectly here?
You've never read a Green Lantern
I've
comic.
never in my life, except the famous 1968 Neil Adams Green Lantern
Well,
issue.
see, there's one.
Right. Yeah, there's one. Yes.
One.
Good point.
I mean, because that's where I was going. I mean, I can
Yeah.
get not having read much. I mean,
Yeah. But
I
one
don't
isn't
know
none.
how
You're
much
right.
Green Lantern beyond that. I mean, I've actually read most of that run, the O'Neill Adams run,
Yeah.
and I don't think I've read much beyond that, except like
Yeah.
when he's with other people. But to have not read, and I know that you come at comics from a different angle. You weren't actually much of the superhero kid, were you?
Well, I was a diehard Marvel kid, except
Okay.
that, yeah, except like Wonder Woman was my intro into
Okay.
comic collecting as like a 3-year-old. Um, but yeah, like I basically went from being like a G.I. Joe Transformers comics kid to I had a brief, lucky mid late 80s run in with pre toy Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics as like and I
Okay.
guess maybe an 8-year-old
Okay.
in Alabama. For some reason, this local bookshop where I got my
I happen to
comics,
have them.
you had like, I don't know, it was pre-Return to New York issues, but I actually have like the first Turtles comic I ever bought was actually where they were announcing that they had signed a deal for toys and licensing. And I'm always kind of mystified. I was like this third grade kid who was like, ninjas are cool, and somehow
Right.
stumbled into still gritty, independent books. And so a lot of the art in those early Turtles comics were the first time I saw comics art that was literally dirty, that looked
Okay.
grimy, that had
Right.
so much of a human touch to it.
Right.
But mostly for superheroes, like I fell in hard with X-Men
Okay.
around 1990. I also
Okay.
loved Daredevil. I loved Ann
Oh, I
Nesenti's
love
run on
Daredevil.
Daredevil, especially.
Oh,
But I'm a
Anne's
diehard X-Men
Anne's
reader.
wonderful. I talked to Anne once. Anne was very,
Sweet.
very sweet.
Yeah, she
And
rules.
Anne was a wonderful interview. Okay. Uh, I just see. I had to look up Kirby Crackle.
Oh yeah.
um, so you were saying before, and it's funny because well, I didn't manage to get through the entire collection because I've been doing a lot. Anybody who hasn't picked up Sounds of Your Name really should go check it out. It's available on Comixology. I'm certain you can find it in print if you look hard enough. Um, but you were talking about Fall Through really being the comic that you've been writing all along, and having read Fall Through before I started reading this, I can both see that and see how you needed to grow as an artist to get it right. So
Without a doubt.
talk a little bit about the journey of going from, I mean, you've got some creative paneling, but a lot of 9 panel, 6 panel structure. It looks a lot more like not an underground, but like somewhere between the Hernandez brothers and Tomini and Clouds and just you know standard Marvel comic books at the time, only in black and white, and um, it's fantastic for early work. I don't want it to sound to our listeners. I can see your face, so I know you're not taking any of this as, oh, you sucked, because you didn't suck. It's. I mean, I'm flipping through the pages right now as I talk. Um, I mean, it's really. I mean, if you'd never strayed from this, you'd still be somebody that I had a huge appreciation for. But I think it's the ways that you've strayed from this, the ways that you've opened up your pages, the ways that you've sometimes loosened your lines,
Mhm. Definitely.
um, that have made something like Fall Through possible. So kind of talk to me about that journey, if you
You
would.
bet. Well, okay. So importantly, like growing up in pre-internet Arkansas, when I started self-publishing comics in '92, like the peak of the first image wave. And so started by doing, guns and boobs, dystopian, superhero, anti-authoritarian adventure comics, you know. Um, and I really didn't have an awareness that non-superhero or non-power struggle comics existed for the most part until the mid 90s when I left Arkansas for college. Um, so like when I wound up in New York City going to SVA for cartooning, I was still pretty fresh into the potential of comics to tell any kind of story. And like along with, like I'd been self-publishing mostly superhero comics in the early into mid 90s. And I started publishing a zine that was, more personal, had some bad poetry, but also had some shorter comics with some like punk rodents and stuff. But it didn't occur to me until around 97, 98 that my zine work and my comics work could be the same thing. And Yeah, like so a lot like two books that really blew my world open were I Never Liked You by Chester Brown
Yep.
and Flood by Eric Drucker. And so these books really kind of like made me recognize that everything could just be one thing. And so a lot of my personal narratives and social political focus and stuff that would have been in my zines suddenly had a place to be narrated through comics. However, I was still like I was really falling in love with some of the like structures and minimalism that that Chester Brown or that John Porcellino sort of brought to the table for me at that time. But I was still primarily influenced by like Arthur Adams, Bill Sienkiewicz, Michael Golden. These were my dudes.
Right.
John Romita Jr.
Right.
Like I think a lot of his like use of negative space and black gutters and stuff, especially with Daredevil, the Man Without Fear with Frank Miller, a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
that was deeply influential on me. But yeah, basically, like, so a lot of my work that's in Sounds of Your Name, a lot of it is, I mean, it's all self published initially. A lot of it is student work still, where I have a vision that I, in retrospect, like far exceeds my ability to, or really like my being in the right place to spread my wings and fly at all yet. And so a lot of it is the process of working out and discovering for myself what's actually possible in comics. But I mean, that makes a lot of it, like there's obviously a lot of like navel gazing and just like talking around things, having not yet learned the value of clarity and concreteness. So, like, I was figuring out that I could do intuitive, weird comics with a lot of like subjective sensory experiences. But I mean, frankly, it wasn't until the March books that I began to apply this very necessary, you know, clarity and concreteness to my work. And after March, I was able to kind of bring that to my magical realist work and make my weird stuff weirder, but kind of grounded by the concreteness. So coming back around, yeah, like Fall Through was something that initially was something I was maybe interested in writing a zine about in 2007 when my main band was defunct. Um, and it lasted a couple of weeks and I just kind of put it in a box. Um, but over time, I realized that, like, yes, for me, the best place to talk, to tell the truth and talk about these things that I care about is through fiction. And it just took a long time to arrive at a place where I'm like, now I know how to do this. I have this set of characters that has emerged for one scene in my book, Come Again. And I don't want to say goodbye to them yet. I want to continue their adventure, and I need to figure out what that is and how to say what I want to say through it. So yeah, like in a lot of ways, it really ties the whole room together.
Well, you said something interesting there in terms of March being part of what uh, helped you define your storytelling better. And you've always kind of, I mean, from uh, was it The Silence of Our Friends? Uh, through March, Lies My Teacher told me you have a steady, Too Dead is fiction, but it's somebody else's written fiction, and it's much more grounded in history.
Right.
You have throughout a lot of your career balanced your personal fiction work with doing nonfiction, some personal. Save It for Later is still one of my favorite books. Um, yeah, I mean, every time I get ready to sit down with you, I remember that. And don't take this the wrong way. You're like the cartoonist that's among my favorite cartoonists that I always forget to list as among my favorite cartoonists.
I
Does
accept
it make
that. Yeah,
sense?
you
And
bet.
and
It's
in
a good
part
spot to be
because
in.
I almost think of you as too cartoonish. Because I'm not necessarily recommending Fall Through to the same person that I'm recommending Lies My Teacher Told Me to.
Yeah, you bet. They occupy very different spaces, and for me as well, like they satisfy very different parts of my soul and my mind.
So, well, but you also just said that you use your fiction to tell the things that that really matter to you. But I know that you also use your nonfiction for that. So talk to me about how that works,
Sure.
how they inform each other.
A lot of it is like, I mean, my a lot of a lot of it is tied to the practicalities of how I've developed a way to like make a living and continue working on stuff. And a lot of that has had to do with generally falling into this space where I have a nonfiction piece that's often a collaboration with another writer, and I've got my own weird book. And typically, I'll have a little bit bigger of an audience for the nonfiction work, and that helps me make a living much better.
Right.
Um, but
Well, I imagine more libraries and schools too.
certainly,
And
yes.
it's
Um,
always nice when you can sell 30 or 300 copies at a time
without
because,
a doubt.
the class sets are being purchased.
So in general, like I've developed a pretty clear sense of how I want to convey things and what the final shape and size for my nonfiction work is going to be. My fiction work, going from like Swallow Me Whole to Any Empire to Come Again to Fall Through, some have been as big as 300 pages. But in general, like a lot of it has had to do with moving through these waves of being like Any Empire is a good example where like I in a lot of ways I kind of lucked out with Swallow Me Whole, my first kind of full-length graphic novel, and I was just truly doing it my way, really strange story that that sort of creeps into your psyche. And I'm still surprised that so many people, especially like teenagers and young adults, really latched
Connect to it.
onto it and got something out of it that I wouldn't have expected as a just maybe 29, 30-year-old cartoonist. And I
Which is such a testament to how quickly we forget what it's like to be a teenager.
indeed, yes.
Because to me, reading that as a high school teacher, as somebody who's generally pretty connected to what it was like to be a teenager and go, oh God, I'm so glad I'm not a teenager anymore, but also try to be very empathetic with those in front of me that are. Um, Swallow Me Whole was totally a teenager book.
Thank you. Yeah, like
It doesn't
truly.
shock me at all that a teenager would connect to.
So like at the time I was really like I wasn't even I had no awareness of any of potential readership at all. So
Right,
it's like I wasn't even in a position where I could think about where a reader might be coming from.
right.
And so as I was kind of rolling with that, Any Empire, I was really like spreading my wings and like going for gold. I was doing again a very intuitive, weird fiction propelling a set of observations, especially back in like the late 2000s, that kind of predict the hellscape we're in now. And it was just a lot of stuff I saw coming from the horizon, a lot of thoughts about nationalism, myth, power, violence, militarism, all this stuff. But I mean, that came in at like a swirling 300 pages. And then a lot of it was then the process of reining that back in. And so Come Again, about 260 pages, really rooted in a lot more concreteness that carries the story through. And then I was like, wait a minute, the more I do that, then like the weird stuff has room to be even weirder.
Right.
Um, but ultimately, like going into Fall Through, initially I was like, this is going to be a succinct book. I know what I want to do. I know the story I want to tell. My goal for myself is to make this like 160 pages. Like for me, I want this to be a short and sweet book. And it wound up being about 190,
Right.
which was fine and was the exact length it needed to be.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it's about
but it
perfect.
allowed me to kind of like recognize that, being able to use a 6 panel grid or a 9 panel grid, especially in a book that's a relationship story, both between Jody and Diana and amongst their band as a whole.
Yeah.
So much of it is
I mean,
conversational.
I loved the band dynamic. I
Thank
loved
you.
the different places they were, their lives. The one that, loved being on tour, loved playing, but had the brother at home that
You bet.
he felt responsible for. I mean, just I've commented on I don't know if you've ever run across any of Sarah Gailey's work in either
I don't believe so.
comics or fiction. I think you'd like Sarah Gailey's work. But I was reading one of their books with a student recently, and um, it's like a murder mystery at a magic high school, and two sisters who have been estranged since their mother died a decade ago, reconnecting, and a love story, maybe even two love story, just
Sign me up. Yeah.
um and as I'm reading it and it's working, and I thought this to bring this together, that I was fall through is another example. So often when you're in like a creative writing class or whatever, people are like, don't do too much, you gotta focus on what's important, and fall through is such an example of you didn't cut anything.
Indeed. I mean,
You
but a
didn't cut
lot of it
anything.
is like no matter.
Every character has depth. If there was any reason to
Yeah.
give them depth, you gave them depth. Sometimes we don't get the whole story because that's how life works.
Thank
But
you.
that doesn't mean it
Yeah.
wasn't there.
Right. Right. And I think that a big I think one of the least helpful bits of like advice from teachers and elders, and it's something that all of us have heard in any kind of storytelling, and is basically like, if something doesn't, yeah, if something doesn't push the story forward, it's not necessary.
Right.
When the way that we experience the world is by catching all these unfinished threads and these like foggy windows into other people's lives, by like so much of characterization is snippets that give us just the briefest glimpse into a much deeper, more complex picture, but we don't have the privilege of actually knowing what
Yeah.
that the rest of that
But
picture is.
it's also just that delicate thread. I mean, I understand the advice because I
Yeah, me
mean,
too, at the same time.
some of my favorite works are. I mean, I adore Richard Stark's Parker novels.
Yeah.
And as great as Donald Westlake is in general, when he turns on his Richard Starkness and does Parker novels, he is so tight.
Yeah.
There's barely a wasted syllable, much less a wasted word. Right?
You bet.
So I have that great appreciation for strip everything away that doesn't matter right here.
Yeah.
Particularly because that makes the overall, I mean, people talk about Parker not having any character development. He's just how he is. And I'm like, you clearly haven't read them all. He completely evolves. It's just over all 26 books.
Sure. Wow.
He moves as far over like 5 books as you're used to a character moving over the first act of a book.
You bet. Yeah.
So that can be great advice. And we've also all read the books that don't cut anything.
Oh yes.
And also make you like frustrated. There's
Indeed.
such a thin line of being able to, this is a whole character. I am not cutting any part of this character out, no matter what, and I will either find a way to tie it in, or I'll at least make it so important to the character that it doesn't have to tie into the plot.
Yeah. And there was a lot within Fall Through there, like I've had these characters since 2013.
Right.
And so getting to actually grow and know them, and like having these moments that sound really cliche, but they're so real, where a character surprises you by making a choice that it seems like that I didn't make for them. They reveal themselves in ways that surprise me. And we're like, oh, they're alive. But that would kind of come back around to the idea of preciousness from a creative standpoint, where I would have to kind of watch that, like, all of these little scenes and these backstory moments that I had in my head that were like rapidly expanding, um, became, you can feel them become precious to you, and like, oh, this has to be in the book. This is a big deal. And you have to catch yourself and like force yourself to ask the question, does it have to be in the book? And it was nice because, at a certain time you calm down, you come back down to earth, and you're like, that
Kill your
actually doesn't
darlings.
have to be in the book. And like now I've actually penciled and written an entire prequel to fall through that
Oh
does
wow.
clock in at 290 pages. And it's been
Wow.
sort of that same process. It's different. It's much more of a character study, and it's a little more mature in that way.
Cool.
But it's that same creative struggle back and
So,
forth
so
of
I don't
like,
know if they heard it here first, but it sounds like there's a prequel to Fall
it's
Through
true.
coming, and
Yeah,
I'm excited.
yeah, it's going to be
And if you
called
don't find a
Diana.
publisher quickly enough, just send me roughs. I'll read them.
You bet. So that's been
You can
very
send me roughs
exciting.
anyway. I mean, if you've already
Of
got them
course.
digitized, I'll
So
take
yeah, it's
anything you ever want me to look at, Nate. Um, let's transition a little bit to uh, both lies my teacher told me and
okay.
nonfiction in general. Um, I'm gonna state my quite possibly, the opinion that I will either not be willing to defend 10 years from now, or will be the unpopular opinion 10 years from now, or even 2 weeks from now. Um, Run is an amazingly important work. John Lewis is somebody who needed to be elevated in a way that he hadn't been before Run. I think, I think, or not Run, well, March and Run. I think March and Run um, put John Lewis at the center of the civil rights movement in a way he hadn't been before, at least in the public eye. And I don't want to take anything away from that. That being said, lies my teacher told me, particularly coming out in this moment where half the country wants to water down what's already watered down history teaching. And that part's not even getting talked about. The fact that we already have watered
Right.
down history teaching. The fact that my mother didn't know who Father Coughlin was when he came up in a conversation yesterday. You know, the fact that uh, so few people know that Woodrow Wilson, as well as championing the League of Nations, also desegregated the federal government. Or
He resegregated. Yeah.
resegregated,
Oh yeah.
resegregated. In other
Yeah.
words, we had desegregated
Yeah.
150 years ago, but we decided to go backwards in the teens. Um, I don't know if there's a more important book that you've written, particularly in terms of when it is coming out.
For sure.
Uh,
I mean, like the original version of Lies My Teacher Told Me that came out in the mid '90s,
right.
and it's not hyperbole to say this. It really crystallized the way that we talk about miseducation, nationalist myth, the book ban and reality averse movement of today. The words we use and the ways we contextualize a lot of these concepts owes a huge debt to Lies My Teacher Told Me. And so it's wild that being combined with the special vulnerabilities that comics have in the face of this book ban campaign. It's so wild that a comics edition of the source material is being, brought forth into this world, this moment, right now. It's head spinning.
Well, I'll take it a step further. I mean, not just the special scrutiny that comics fall under with banning, because I mean, seriously, genderqueer is just a coming of age story.
Oh yes.
And that's the problem. they're not actually upset with any pornography. They're upset that it's just a coming of age story. That that oh my God, I am not having trouble with my gender identity, but I still relate to this character that's my age and going
Right.
through stuff that people my age go through. New Kid is you got to get to volume 3 before there's anything that's truly overtly about race, which again is the problem. Drama, there's nothing in drama that should have it banned. But
For
there
real.
are a couple of kids that are gay and or non-binary, and that's not a story at all. And that's the problem. It's not a story at all.
Right.
It's just accepted. That's their problem. Their problem is that, oh, our kids could read this and they would think that this is normal because it's normal in the book and everything else in the book is normal. So why isn't it normal? And we don't want it to be normal.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like it's an issue with largely white parental discomfort and anxiety about
But
not wanting to answer questions, not wanting to have certain conversations, not wanting to be vulnerable and realize that they are part of a world that has changed.
right. Or even hasn't changed, but
Touche. Yeah, good point.
but that means that they need to actually like just
That has
acknowledge
carved
it.
out space for
Right.
voices and people who are not them. Yes.
Right. But so this book, um, have you seen the adaptation of Stamp from the Beginning?
Yeah, I did a blurb for it, in fact. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I saw Ibram X. Kendi on one of the news programs talking about that. And he said something really great, and I'm paraphrasing. I wish I could find the YouTube video again because I would like to get it right and give it proper attribution because I paraphrase it a lot. But oh well. Um, it was a news program. It was Ibram X. Kendi. Somebody can go find it for me. He was asked why a graphic novel edition, and he said these are really really heavy topics, and they're complicated topics. And not only does doing a graphic novel help break them down and make them easier to understand, but you can give a levity to them that makes it easier to process that you can't do in prose. You
For
try
real.
to lighten it in prose, it feels like you're making light of it.
Yes. Yeah.
There are ways to lighten it on a comics page where the weight of what's going on is still there, but you don't feel alone with that weight. You feel
Definitely.
that and
A
as
lot
soon
of
as he said that, and I because I read that like the moment it came out, I stayed up till midnight for the Kindle edition to drop, downloaded it, and didn't go to sleep until I was done.
awesome.
Um, and as soon as I saw him say that, I went, Angela Davis, because for people who are unfamiliar with the book, it's split up into parts kind of by major voices of eras following the race history in the United States, from Cotton Mather through Angela Davis. Um, but Angela Davis's talking head pops up all over the book with things like, that seems familiar.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I bring this up because, among other things, I noticed Donald Trump appearing way before Donald Trump was alive in Lies My Teacher Told Me. He just sometimes in an obvious way, sometimes just there in a way that if you're paying attention, it's like, oh shit, he's writing about the 1700s, but he could be writing about today.
Sure. Yeah.
So talk to me about specifically with Lies, but you saw this in March, you saw this some in Save It for Later. Talk to me about what comics as a medium gives you in terms of telling history, telling nonfiction in a really almost a 4 or 5 dimensional way.
You
You
bet.
know, you're not bound to the same this happened and then this happened of the textbooks that you're writing about.
Well, yeah, this is where one of comics' greatest unique strengths is the fact that, I mean, we as comics lovers know this, but it's important to shout it from the mountaintops that your brain is doing overtime when you're reading a comic.
Mhm.
Um, and once you get, once you're literate enough in the ways comics work, your brain adjusts to it and stuff. But really, like, you're juggling so much simultaneous information, and your ability to like contextualize and compare things from any point in a comic at any moment is baked into the ways that the visual component of comics works. The fact that, especially in a modern like meme based culture, this has sort of amplified the potential of comics to convey and iron in certain points and allow people to make connections for themselves by utilizing visual repetitions and textual repetitions with slight variations. Basically makes it so that you're building a narrative shorthand throughout the book that you don't need to like overdo, because the
Right.
reader is going to learn to do that work themselves. Especially through March, I recognize that like the reason why March was always a comic and why it worked as a comic was because Andrew recognized very clearly the ability of comics to foster empathy, the ability of comics
Right.
to drop you into someone else's shoes and experiences, with a kind of immediacy and a kind of subjective, uh, exploration of their world in a way that like can be life changing and has been life changing for us comics lovers. And
Right.
so, like for Lies, my teacher told me, one half of it is basically a textbook about American history textbooks. And
Right.
then the other half of it is narrated by the original author, James Lewin, with him as a character in a classroom, sort of outlining not only these historical moments and how they've been uh, you know, misembodied and mistaught throughout history, but also explaining why and how the entire industry and apparatus by which textbooks are made allows for these failures and what they're providing cover for in the American
Right.
people, in society, in our ability to reckon with the truth and how that trickles out. And the original book is like quite irreverent. Like I really love James
Yeah.
Llewellyn's sense of humor, and we didn't get a chance to meet in person. He passed away in August of 2021, and we were going to finally meet in November 2021. We talked a lot on the phone and over email and stuff. So it was very important for me to kind of try to embody everything that I knew and had acquired about his sense of self, his personality that came forth.
Right.
Because one reason why Lies, my teacher told me, works so well as a book, as prose, was because James Lewin allowed his own voice to shine, being like, I'm an educator and a historian. This is not only the story of these moments in American history, but this is me as a teacher, like learning and being fascinated and blown away and angered, and brought to laughter or tears by some of this absurdity. Uh,
Right.
and and the reason why it does work is it offers this very human entry point through James Lewin himself. And I feel like that's a lot of the levity, is getting that sense of who he actually was that guided
Right.
his work. But then using, yeah, a lot of those repeated visual motifs and themes so that a lot of that information was allowed to be non-textual information. Like I knew that there's no way everything from the original book could make it into the comic. And so I was like, I need to make a goal to make this like a 250-page book, no more than 300 pages, or it's just going to be too much tuna, to quote the Nick Kroll show. So to keep it from being too much tuna, basically I was like, about half of the stuff is going to wind up on the cutting room floor. And so from the get go, I was like, I need to embrace the impact of the original book and really guide people to use these two books as companions for each other and be like, there's always more to learn, whether it's sourcing the brilliant footnotes from the original book, but also just like a ton more information and more examples, more context can always be found in the source material. And instead of trying to like steer myself away from that companionship, I need to realize that's a great strength by which the comic can stand on its own feet.
Right. You also, the two of you updated it. You dealt with some
Indeed.
of the time in between. Talk to me about how that worked.
Well, there was a 2017 edition of the book that he produced
Okay.
that that updates
That's
us.
even the version that I have.
Right. Yes. And so basically, I had to buy a fresh copy and see what had been updated, but which basically takes us to inauguration day 2017,
Right.
which is very important when we get to, just like the lie, the lies in our future and changes in mass media, changes in propaganda and misinformation. So we actually wrap up the book with the very first uh, lie from the Orange Man from the Oval Office, which is his press secretary, making
Yeah.
the plainly, visibly false claim that the inauguration crowd was the largest, both in person and around the globe, in history. And recognizing like this is an information war and it's a matter of how this information is processed and how it's limited, et cetera. And so going like James Lewin approached me in 2020 about adapting the book, and I jumped in immediately. And so we had about a year and a half together before he passed away. But he was very upfront that like it was going to be my adaptation of his work. And he was very upfront that he probably wasn't going to survive. He had stage 4 cancer, and he was doing very well. He was in a really good spot for a lot of that time that we were talking to each other. Um, but he was very upfront that it was going to be on me to bring the material into the 2020s if necessary. However, because it was important for me that like 95% of this be James Lewin's work, his research, his voice, I was like, well, this means that in as many cases as possible, when I'm actually updating things for the 2020s, this is where I need to keep the sanctity of his text and see if I can update it visually while retaining his information from his 2017 version of the book. There are a few moments in which I did actually update that. Like one thing I put on hold until the very last minute had to do with talking about the US involvement in the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I was in the process of breaking it down into pages and penciling it, that would have been late 2020, early 2021. I remember having to write to the editors and to Jim himself, like, we don't, this doesn't have an ending yet. I've set aside 2 or 3 pages to be able to make, bring this up to the present moment, but I cannot do these pages yet because who knows what's going to happen in the next 2 years. So there were moments like that where I recognized that I was making a living document that was going into very, very recent events. But a lot of the
Yep.
stuff, especially with like going back into my save it for later work, like a lot of the aesthetics and a lot of pandemic era far right fake populist authoritarian pushback, guns and Confederate flags and anti-mask movements, book ban, public intimidation, all this stuff was inserted visually over James Lewin's original text.
Okay.
And again, testifying to the power of comics, it
Right.
works seamlessly because, as you
Absolutely.
were saying at the beginning, a lot of this information, even if we're talking about stuff in the 70s, 80s, 90s, uh, the text does not require an update to apply it to the 2020s.
No. I mean, I'm listening to Rachel Maddow's prequel right now, and well, am enough of a history buff that I'm not learning a ton of new things. The way she's bringing together all sorts of different stuff from that 20s and from really the outbreak of the First World War up until the way fascism was both rising and beaten down in America
Right.
is important to know, and stuff that we don't in general
Got it
know.
out.
I mean, I'm always blown away, and I'm let me rephrase. I am included in and blown away by the number of people that found out about the Tulsa massacre through the Watchmen TV show.
You bet.
And that includes people I know who are black and grew up in Tulsa.
Sure. Yeah. You bet.
know? Suppressing our history for both good and ill. There's a great book that I was thinking about this morning called We Spoke Out. Do you know that?
Oh, yes. Cartoonists during the Holocaust?
It was more after.
Yeah. Yo
But
Books put it out.
but yeah,
Yeah.
but the fact that comics was one of the first places that really dealt with the Holocaust, because I was in that first generation of students where it was dealt with in our history classes. It didn't occur to me that my parents might not have learned about it in their history classes, that
For sure.
anybody in between. And some of that was for good reasons. I mean, it turns out that a lot of the Jews, a lot of the survivors, a lot of the families of the survivors just weren't comfortable talking about it yet. They just, so it wasn't strictly a let's whitewash. It was a trigger warning, for lack of a better term, right now. But when you combine all of those things together, between people who are hesitant to have particularly recent painful history taught because they want more perspective, they want more distance, and between people who don't want it taught because, well, it makes them look bad or makes their version of the world look bad or whatever, it's so easy for stories not necessarily to be lost, because we've got a pretty good system for keeping them in libraries and digitized newspapers and whatever, but to certainly fall out of the public eye. Um, and I've marveled in recent years. I mean, we've talked about your book, we talked about Ibram X. Kendi and Joel Christian Gill's Stand from the Beginning. Um, the other most powerful thing of you and Andrew on March is since then, there has just been a deluge of comic book histories.
Definitely.
Comic books taking and again, not only telling these stories, but doing so in a way that can't be done as well in prose. Certainly is accessible to as many people in prose. Can't be done as well in film documentaries, and certainly wouldn't be as accessible to people. I mean, one that have you read Wake?
Oh, yes, I love Wake. What a
I,
unique approach from
yeah.
Rebecca Hall.
For people who haven't, and this is one that I need to book club this one at some point. I mean, first I need to reach out to the creators and talk to them, but I would really like to have a real discussion about the hidden history of women's led slave revolts, because it's both a history of these women led slave revolts that, like, I mean, again, it takes like 35 seconds to use logic to go, of course there were women led slave revolts. But how many of us never used that logic? We thought of John Brown and we thought of Nat Turner, and that was it.
But yeah,
Um,
structurally, it's a very advanced book in terms of
right.
like really continuing this subjective objective interplay, but recognizing that half of the book is the history of women-led slave revolts, but the other half is the fact that Rebecca Hall, the writer, as a scholar and academic, it's her story of not being able to find the
Yes.
history. And
Yes.
it's the,
That was
the
exactly where I was going.
it's
Is it's
yeah, it's the
also
hidden,
this
yeah, the
this
hidden part
story
of the
of
hidden
having to
history.
do ridiculous amounts of research, learning how to read what's not recorded.
Yes, it's brilliant.
um, and I think, uh, I mean, one of the things we teach in school, we teach about first primary sources and secondary sources, but we also try to teach about how there are advantages of primary sources, but there are also advantages of secondary sources. I mean, if your primary source is, let's say, Bill Barr talking about the Russia investigation versus somebody 30 years from now going back and really piecing together that entire time in history and including the Russia investigation and whatnot, which is probably going to be more accurate. And you got to go, well, oh, Bill Barr had literally just been hired by the person who the Russia investigation.
Yeah,
I mean, I use that for our listeners, but like in a history class that I was sitting in on recently, because I'm a special ed teacher, so I wind up in a lot of different classes. They were using, I think it was the Qi dynasty, the first, or not the Qi, the I will butcher it, so I don't remember. Essentially, the first major Chinese dynasty, which was very big on controlling history, very big on burning books, and this is so there was a statement from their minister of history about how the emperor and his laws brought peace and tranquility, and the question was, so over here we have historians saying, well, yeah, there was order, but a lot of it came from killing everybody.
right.
And over here you have discussion from the person put in charge of making the history by the emperor about how great the emperor was at leading the people. How should we weigh those against each other? Um, so I mean, that was one of the things I loved in Wait is that, along with, what's your cat's name?
Oh, this is Bruce.
Hey, Bruce.
He's a very fancy man.
Yeah. Are you
But
are you Batman in your spare time?
oh, actually, his full name is Bruce Maine, since he
Bruce Wayne. I love it.
resembles a lion. Yes.
I love it. But it also examines how even historians have to really unpack um, primary sources and try to
Without a
figure
doubt.
out what's being said and what's not being said, who's saying it. Um, it's sometimes so interesting to look at the differences in history, whether it's the civil rights movement or pre-World War II, from looking at like the New York Times versus the Pittsburgh Courier.
Yeah.
You know, perspective is everything. Um, Even and we're in an era of news that tries so hard to be unbiased that they're biased, because the tools they use to be unbiased only work if both sides are playing by the same rule,
Right. Yeah.
and one side is not.
Yeah. It's
Um,
a fatal mix of a very naive interpretation, a very
right,
naive good faith interpretation, mixed with really like using the master's tools
right.
to keep his own house up, while convincing yourself that you're not coming from that place. Yeah.
But there's already an inherent bias in just what they choose to report on.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
That's so journalism history without a bias is, I think, less valuable than being honest about what our biases are.
Mhm.
Um, so, and I thought I was going somewhere, and I feel like I've trailed off. So, you talked a little bit about your next fiction project. Do you have a nonfiction project that you're allowed to talk about yet?
Not
Anything
yet.
in mind?
Andrew Iden and I are teaming back up throughout the year to do a one-shot comic for the New York City Department of Education for
Oh,
their
nice.
Civics for All
I love what they're
line.
doing with that.
And he and I have each done work for them over the last couple of years. But it's in the works right now. It might be about the Great Railroad Strike of 1886, but yeah, we're definitely gonna work on that. As far as longer form nonfiction, I haven't gotten to that space yet. So once I finished Fall Through and Lies My Teacher Told Me, one of my big life goals, I had this brief window where I'm like, okay, I'm usually like I meticulously overplan for things, like responsible in some ways to a fault, so that I've always got the bases covered and make sure the bills are paid. Um, and my wife Rachel is like, I'll complain about being worried about something coming up in the future, comics wise or professionally speaking, and then she'll be like, she regularly reminds me that like sometimes things fall into my lap or things have a way of working out and I should just chill out a little bit. So when I finished these two books, I was like, okay, so I've got this new book emerging, Diana. I need to like get another pot on the stove to see what the next nonfiction thing is going to be. And immediately I recognized like, or I could actually take it easy for once and maybe things will just be okay. And I'll do one book at a time, hopefully slow down about 15%, and life will be
How,
much better. So
how
that's
old are your kids?
12 and 9 now. So
This would
we're
be a
fully in
really
the
good
teens there.
age to do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
they're
So like,
hitting that truly amazingly interesting age. And particularly if they haven't reached the point where you're dumb, don't
uh-huh.
don't waste the time.
For sure. Yeah, I'm right in the middle there. One, like we're absolute morons to the older one, and then the younger one, we're in that golden zone still.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, so this is really where I'm like, especially because it's 2024, and my overarching feelings are just in general like, buckle up, prepare for the rest of the year and beyond,
Right.
regardless of what happens or does not happen. And so one bit of it is basically like, so don't overload myself on things that maybe I shouldn't be freaking out about right now. So
That's a
just
good
be
idea.
good doing one book at a time
Yeah.
and maybe enjoy
Maybe
life
taking an
for a little bit.
afternoon off every once in a while.
Yes.
Maybe take a walk before the kids come home from
My Lord,
school.
yes. Actually, one thing that has radically improved my quality of life is the fact that over the last year and a half, I've become a Wednesday warrior again. And I go
Okay.
to the comic book shop every Wednesday at lunchtime. And a lot of this is like 2 years ago, I was basically guided into the correct way to get back into X-Men
Okay.
because it just seemed too deep and too convoluted. Like I
Okay.
didn't know how to start.
Right.
But in that time, I've probably read 20,000 pages of X-Men over the past 2 years. And I'm just like, I spent 25 years away. And now I'm
Right.
like, no, I'm like, this is this huge thing that was just missing from my life for
Right.
so long. And it is so meaningful to be able to just go to the comic book store and go to this physical space
It
that
is.
is this echo of my entire life, and to
Yeah.
go there every Wednesday, like I can't believe I didn't do that for half my life.
So that'll lead me to two great um closing questions. The first and easy one is um give a shout out to your comic shop.
Oh yeah, Vintage Phoenix Comics in Bloomington, Indiana, a fine place.
Vintage Phoenix in Bloomington. Okay. And the second is normally this is where I ask people to give me a book that they love, and not enough people have read for them to talk about, and you're more than welcome to do that as well. But you've done that with me before. So, what I'm going to ask you now, since you're back into Wednesday Warrior status, is what are the books that you like most look forward to coming out right now?
You bet. Well, like 85 or 90% of my attention is strictly like Krakoan and post Krakoan era X-Men.
X-Men. Okay.
Yeah, and so like a lot of it is like realizing that there's this continuity that actually went through the 25 years that I didn't read, and
Right.
then like catching up on this brilliant, beautiful, shining 5 years or 4 years of X-Men comics during the Krakoan era, and becoming a Wednesday Warrior as it all falls apart
Right.
has it's been very interesting because like it's made me kind of adjust, like getting back into all that stuff through trade paperback collections and
Right.
stuff. But
Right.
now
I
being
did like the way they collected those, where you could get the collections in
oh
like
yeah,
reading order rather than just by title.
indeed, yeah,
That was that
it's
was
been
nice.
a nice approach. But becoming a Wednesday Warrior as it all falls apart and uh, kind of tapping back into that sense I haven't had since I was about a 15-year-old, where in finally things are limited and defined in these weekly doses, and books are relating to each other on the pages, but you're also shuffling continuity as you read.
Right.
I forgot the ways in which that activates like your nerd mind when you're
Yeah.
reading things on a weekly basis. Outside of X-Men, um, like some of the books that have really like been the most exciting for me are like, well, I'd say my all around favorite cartoonist who's a peer of mine is Becky Cloonan. And we went to school
Okay.
together, but weren't friends back in the day.
I love
And just
Becky.
like I love everything she's ever done. But
Yeah.
her
Me too.
Somna
Samna.
series with
Oh my
Tula
God.
Lote,
Oh my
it's
God.
like it ticks every box of
Yep.
everything I like to put in my own
Yep.
stories and everything I
New
like
issue this
about.
week.
That's right. That's right. Um, so like Somna has been a
Yep.
big deal. Uh, Catwoman Lonely City
Oh
is just
yeah. Cliff
utter
Chang. Oh my
perfection,
God. Yeah.
utter perfection. And I was very late to Paper Girls. It was only a couple of
Oh,
years ago.
okay. Yeah.
Um, and actually, a lot of like I had already colored half or more of Fall Through when I finally fell into Paper Girls. But getting to see the application of color in that series
Right.
was such a proof of concept and was so vindicating, but it really underlined what what the value, the emotional and the narrative value of color can be in
Oh,
comics.
absolutely.
And I've been kind of developing a color coding system of my own in my own work, but it was just really great to see a master handle it and then see
Yeah.
them carry that over to Lonely City.
Yep.
Um, uh, yeah, so those are some of that's some of the stuff I've been most excited about. Also, A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. I think
Oh,
that was
so good.
the best book of last year, and I also love
Totally disturbing, but so good.
yes, I love everything Emily Carroll has
Yeah.
ever done,
Yeah.
and so
Really,
that's
really
very
special.
high up on my list. I also loved "It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth" by Zoe
Oh, Zoe
Thorogood,
Thorogood is
like
just killing it.
killing
Everything
it.
she does. Her
Yes,
hack slash run is ridiculous.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I
like
think that's perfectly
ridiculous.
done. You bet. And also Totem, which Fantagraphics put out. It's another kind of relationship based, very quiet, creepy
I don't think I've
horror book or
read that.
thriller book, really. Um, Totem was very, very exciting. I Thought You Loved Me
Oh,
by Ari
yeah.
Naomi. Uh, it really, it truly stands alone in terms of doing what comics does best and being utterly unique about it.
Right.
Yeah, so that's some of the stuff that I've been most excited about.
Well, very cool. Thank you so much, Nate. It's
You bet.
always a pleasure to speak with you. Hopefully, we'll find an excuse to do so again, and hopefully, our paths cross out in the wild again because it
Count on it.
was great seeing you out at CXC last year.
You know it.
So for 22 panels, this has been Nate Powell. We will see you after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22panelspodcast.